Well, you've been busy as usual. We keep an eye on your YouTube page every day at youtube.com/that Preston Journalist. And you're always knocking out the videos. And it occurs to me one of the themes that you've been going on recently is the build-up of, well, the fall, as it were, almost of the present government, the potential rise of so-called conservative alternative in the Reform UK party, and also the possible chance that Keir Starmer is going to win the next general election. So I'd like to talk around those issues with you this evening and get your thoughts on that, because you've obviously put quite a bit of thinking into the matter. Now, do you take the rise of the Reform UK party seriously? Do you think it's likely to be a threat to the Conservatives or even to some Labour votes next year?
For the first time ever, I actually think a smaller party genuinely has a chance of getting a seat or two. The problem's going to be for Reform UK when it comes to the leadership. So a while ago, I was talking to Neil Hamilton, the ex-Tory MP, who's now leader of UKIP. And he said something to me that stuck with me, actually. He's absolutely bang on when he said that Nigel Farage will never be part of any club where he isn't the main attraction. And he's absolutely right about that. So when it comes to Reform UK rising, they're absolutely going to need Farage, because they haven't got a bigger draw than that. He would instantly catapult them, I think, to possibly up to maybe even 20% in the polls if he said he was standing or even leading the party. But Richard Tice, of course, who's leading the party at the moment, isn't going to be too keen on that idea, I don't think, just to step aside because Nigel Farage wants to come in. So I think there's going to be some battles at the top, but I think they've genuinely got a shot at taking some seats. Just look at the polling this week for Starmer and Sunak. Starmer's dropped 13% in a week in the approval ratings. He's now on -11. Rishi Sunak has sunk to -49, which is quite unbelievable. Even only Liz Truss has managed to get worse than that in recent times. And Farage's popularity has shot up to +18%. The guy that everyone's meant to hate, or the public are meant to hate. So really, ITV no doubt wanted to humiliate the guy and take him on there and get him voted out straight away on that I'm a Celebrity thing. But they've done the exact opposite and give him £1.5 million at the same time. Absolutely mad.
It is quite remarkable, and I was kind of surprised that they would give him that platform, really. And you wonder what's really going on there. I mean, is it that ITV actually want him to stand because they want the Tories, they want votes to be taken away from the Tories? But that might not make a whole lot of sense from that particular point of view. But to give him all that money as well was just incredible. But it's certainly shot up his profile in the
I don't think it
space.
does. I don't think it'll do the Tories as much harm as it might do Labour. If you think it wasn't your metropolitan elites, if you will, that got Brexit, for example. It was working class seats that voted for Brexit, like seats mainly in the north of England, really. I mean, I know obviously Scotland, over 1 million people voted for it. Wales also voted for it. Again, all working class communities voted for it. If you look at your places like London or your more well-to-do places, a lot of them voted to remain. Oh, yeah. And a lot of the big cities voted to remain. Again, your metropolitan people voted to remain. So Farage can obviously galvanise support from working class people, working class seats. And it's a massive skill he's got. There's only him and Boris Johnson probably that have got the same skill that can connect with such a range of people, if you will. And I'm not saying that either of them are the answers to this country's problems, but they've definitely they're the only two people I can think of that can talk to these communities. Rishi Sunak just gets called a billionaire all the time, which his wife is a billionaire, and how can you be in touch with normal people? Fair comment. Starmer is a multi-millionaire. He used to be, Attorney General and all that. How can he ever communicate with working class people? Watch him walking around in the street. He looks scared to death when he comes across someone who who isn't a millionaire. He doesn't know how to communicate with people, and that's why I don't think the country wants either of them. And that is going to give Reform a massive platform, whether you like them or not. I think they've got a real shot, serious shot of getting at least 2 or 3 seats, possibly.
That's an interesting point of view. Just the extent to, because we tend to think, oh, people are not happy with Rishi Sunak, but of course there's the whole Keir Starmer phenomenon as well that a lot of people are not happy with. The way I see it going is that the turnout is going to be low, and it might be one of the lowest ever turnouts, because a lot of people are just kind of sickened in many ways. The people, the Brexit dynamic, as it were, that returned the 80-seat majority, I mean, that's just fizzled out into just people being totally disillusioned, literally disillusioned. It's like I thought my vote would count for something. Yeah. And the first thing that happened, we got, and I've said this a million times before, we got Brexit on January the 31st in 2020, and within 6 weeks, we had not taken back control. In fact, we were being very much controlled by the system, which shut down the country for the best part of 2 years. Yeah. And so all these people thinking that there was going to be some kind of burst of national sovereignty that would filter down to the people so that the people themselves would maybe feel freer and happier in life, etc., etc. The complete, absolute opposite of that happened. And the people, in fact, didn't get set free. They got literally imprisoned in their house. And that's how I will personally remember the Tory legacy of the last few years. I know other people might even have forgotten all about that and not care about that anymore. But for me, that was a betrayal of not just the people who voted for Brexit, but a betrayal of this country's principles of freedom and freedom of assembly and all that sort of stuff, and freedom of thought, because if you had the wrong attitude, if you had the wrong thought on what was happening, then you could actually get arrested. So,
for sitting on a park bench, for example, like that couple did in Derby, I think it was. Unbelievable.
Oh yeah, well, I got moved along. I was sitting on a park bench, and a couple of coppers moved me along. I said, you can't sit. You have to move along. So it's happening to everybody all over. So, I wonder, I mean, how bad do you think it's going to get for the Tories? Do you think this could decimate them?
Their only saving grace, ironically, is Keir Starmer. The fact that nobody knows what he thinks or what he stands for. He's the only one that could give the Tory. I'm not one of these people that thinks it's going to be a Blair-style 97 wipeout. Starmer needs a Blair-style swing just to get a majority of 2. So that shows the task he's got to get a working majority. And a working majority, you're going to need at least 35, 40 majorities, have a working majority, so you've got room for people to rebel against you, as they inevitably will, especially in his party when you've got the far left that are going to rebel against him at every turn. So, no, I think it's going to be a very, very small majority or a hung parliament. And then if it is a hung parliament, I mean, that's like Reform UK's Christmases all come at once, because if they do manage a few seats, then they could be the kingmakers. They could be the ones who decide which party gets into power, which would obviously be massive for them. But Starmer, look at him. He made 10 pledges when he was running to become the leader of the Labour Party. He's rolled back on every single one of those pledges. Was it a week and a half ago, Margaret Thatcher was the best thing since sliced bread. A week later, he's calling her terrible. He's just afraid to say anything. And I mean, to be fair to him, his best strategy at the moment, because he's such a dull character, is to say nothing and let the Tories rip each other limb from limb. And he'll probably walk into number 10. But if he keeps speaking, he's going to be in trouble. And when it comes to these televised debates that we always have before general elections, he is going to fall flat on his face because he can't think on his feet. If you watch Prime Minister's questions, he just reads. He doesn't actually say anything. It's like he's still in a courtroom.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, that's an interesting point. He's going to, if he wins, he's not going to win because of anything that he's necessarily done. It's just because people have stopped voting for the Tories.
Yeah.
What you say there, though, about a hung parliament, as you say, it would be good for reform, but if it was also a hung parliament, then whatever SNP MPs were elected, they would also potentially exercise great power. And what they would do would say, we will ally with you, but you must grant us a referendum if we win the 2026 Holyrood election. And that's the contract that the SNP would offer up to the Labour Party if there were a hung parliament.
Yeah.
And I don't have faith that Labour would turn that down. In order to get what they want to do, then they may very well ally with the SNP, and they would simply hide behind the old chestnut that, well, it's if they win the 2026 Holyrood election, it's democracy. We do address these issues in our book, One Big Country. We address that danger of a hung parliament, and we also address the fact that even if the SNP won in 2026, that would still not give them a mandate, at least not constitutionally or democratically. But very often that can just be thrown to the wind anyway, and just the power politics of the moment can determine what way you go. But that would be a big issue.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. Starmer will do literally anything to get. He'd sell his wife to get into number 10. He will do anything he possibly can. I know he's said in the past, I won't sign a deal with the SNP and all that. He will do anything to get into number 10. It doesn't matter. He will sign a deal with the SNP, the Greens, the Lib Dems, you name it. He will do a deal, and he wants to be Prime Minister and be one of the, how many elections have Labour won since the 1970s? Is it something like 3 or 4 elections they've won since the 70s? He's going to be one of very few Labour leaders to win a general election.
Yeah, and he's going to make the most of it as well. And because Labour always do that, when they get in, from their point of view, they make the most of it, and they do bring in an absolute. They have an agenda and they make it happen. And we saw that with Blair, especially, who overturned much of established British constitutionalism as soon as he came in. And they do have Mark II of that ready to go in Gordon Brown's big document, what they're going to do if they get elected. And I'm certain that they'll do this because they always do deliver what they say. They're going to abolish the House of Lords, and they're going to replace it with something called an assembly of the nations and regions, the nations being Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and the regions being 9 of the large regions in England. And this Senate, so-called, or rather assembly, is going to be elected, and it's going to be elected from these devolved regions and nations, and its special task will be to defend devolution, which means that if a central British government, such as the Tories, or indeed Keir Starmer himself, want to, say, stop something happening at Holyrood, such as the Gender Recognition Reform Bill, or if they want to overturn a law that Holyrood has made or something like that, then they have to get it through the Assembly. And if the Assembly disagrees, then it's going to be very difficult for the Parliament for the House of Commons to do it. So the Assembly is basically going to be this massive barrier in the way of the central government in the House of Commons doing anything to affect devolution.
Yeah, so the House of Commons effectively becomes redundant. There'd be no need to have 652 people, whatever it is, sat in the House of Commons earning all that money, because every time they try and do something, this assembly is going to turn around and say, oh, no, you can't do that. This People's Assembly, as they call it. This is, it's communism, this. So,
it's
you're creating a federal system almost.
It is, and that's what they're trying to do, is to get federalism through the back door. And we've got 3 chapters in this book dedicated to that, and it's written in such a way as to actually explain what's happening to a Labour MP who might read it. Because remember, a lot of these Labour MPs, they're going to get elected and they're not going to have a clue what's going on, and they probably will have trouble even spelling devolution. They couldn't tell you what it was or anything like that. So That's what we're facing, and you do wonder if we do get a Labour government after 5 years, what's going to be left of the United Kingdom, if anything. There probably won't be much of an SNP left, but that's because there's not going to be a United Kingdom for them to bother with. That's a very that's a very sceptical and cynical way of looking at things. But
you know what I think would fix our system? I thought about this. Yeah, you're right. Labour come in with this radical agenda like Blair did, destroy the country that bit more, and then they get voted out again for another 10 years. But the Tories they've done basically sod all for the last 13, haven't they, apart from give us a Brexit referendum. But they also struggle, I think, the Tories, to get things through a lot more than Labour do, because the civil service is just, anti-Tory, that they're up for blocking anything the Conservatives try to do that's remotely patriotic or British, like cutting down immigration, etc. So I think what we should do is, for once, copy the Americans and have an American-style system where the civil servants are brought in with the party. That's what I'd do, and I'd replace all the Home Office staff. You can have a few permanent secretaries if you want, like the Cabinet Secretary, etc. But every member of staff that works in the Home Office, the Treasury, the Foreign Office should be brought in by the governing party, whoever it is, and then they'll agree with their agenda, and they won't try and block their agenda, and they'll actually be able to get something done. Mm-hmm. Where at the minute you've got civil servants blocking everything. Civil servants was threatening to go on strike recently because they didn't like the Rwanda plan, and it's nothing to do with them. This government was voted in to cut down immigration. Now they've completely cocked it up, but they might have a chance if their own civil service wasn't working against them as well.
Yeah, I'm very much coming around to that sort of point of view as well, because I'm kind of traditionalist in the sense that, well, I like the idea that the organs of the state, such as these big departments, they should have a certain consistency about them, but only if they themselves understand and go along with the plan. Only if they understand, well, whether it's a Conservative or a Labour Party in charge, I have to do, and it's my job just to deliver on their agenda, because that's what I'm employed to do. And I know that even though I don't like this particular government, I can hold out hope that in 5 or 8 years there'll be a new one that I personally will like. And if you had that attitude, then you could probably survive. And I think we did have that attitude for many years, but we've now reached a situation where everything is so polarized that, as you say, and entrenched, that governments can't get their agenda through what is essentially another form of government, which is that whole blob, I think somebody called it, or in America they kind of call it
the blob, or
the deep state. It's just like you can't get through it; it just completely blocks you. And so the only way that you can deliver what you were voted in to do is, as you say, bring in your departments as you are elected. And I see that very possibly happening. I see a lot of things changing. I think the last few years have started to make people think, what on earth is going on? I think the immigration issue has been a big wake-up call for a lot of people, to see your country basically invaded every day by hundreds and hundreds of men, basically 90-odd% men, every day for years now. And it started especially, it's been going since about 2018, but it became very notable during the 2020s, very noticeable. And that's just the ones that are so obvious, the ones that we can see. There's others coming in illegally, and of course massive legal immigration as well, which is openly transforming the country. Here in Glasgow, I see it changing every week. And people are just going to think, well, where's this going? And who's responsible for this, and what can be done? And time will tell, but I do think that we're entering a period, and I'm hoping that this general election is going to be a waterfall, or watershed, that's it, watershed in some way, and something comes out of that, whether it's the total, complete and utter destruction of the Conservatives, which I think may have to be what we must witness. Then we're going to witness chaos, no question about it, and then out of the chaos will some sort of coherence come together as a result of that. I don't know.
What are you left with after?
But
I mean,
what are you
don't
left
get me
with?
wrong,
That's the
yeah,
danger. Yeah. What are you
just a
left with?
socialist, a load of socialist parties possibly, and then
Mm.
me personally, that's the last thing I want to see. I can't think of a country in the world where socialism works or has
No.
worked.
No.
And if we were left with just a Starmer Labour Party and the Tories were completely wiped out,
Yeah.
there'd just be no opposition whatsoever, would there? They could do exactly what they wanted. And the thought of Labour having a free hand at this country to open the borders, rejoin the EU, just frightens the life out of me, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, I think that there'll be, if that happened, there would be pushback, and these alternative parties, whether it's Reform UK, whether they've got the cojones for the long haul, I don't know, but there would be pushback, and there would be other groups trying to rise up and get their point of view heard. So in that sense, that it's not as if there'd be no hope. There would be alternatives arising to these changed circumstances. We'd far rather things were properly ordered, but it's clearly not. We're clearly not having that, and the Tories have fallen down on the job in the last 13 years. Christopher says, Labour do make the most of it. They wreck everything they touch. He continues, the trouble is that with Labour is that everything they do seems to be irrevocable. Devolution is the prime example of this. Well, that's also true. Once something happens, it's not as if it can really get changed back again in any significant sense.
It was impossible. I mean, the Tories could never have rolled back on devolution. It was just... It was impossible to do. It was never going to happen. We all know why Blair did it, because he thought, at least, it was going to keep Labour in power forever in Scotland, because the Scots would never be so stupid as to vote against the Labour Party, and Labour would be forever winning general elections because they'd have Wales and Scotland, and then they'd keep the northern heartlands in England. But obviously, it completely backfired because he didn't bank on the SNP getting popular. And
that's right.
And now devolution, ironically, is the very thing that keeps Labour from winning votes in Scotland, because the SNP have made obviously such a big issue, and God knows I don't like them, but they're successful at just being a one-trick pony. And those people who vote for them seem to vote for them every single time, which could, when it comes to that general election, there's no doubt in my mind the SNP will have less seats than what they have now. But will Labour really be able to wipe out the SNP enough to gain a decent majority inside Westminster? I'm not sure they will. I'd love to see the SNP wiped out, but I don't think it will happen.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I don't see. I'm not a big optimist as far as that's concerned. I don't think it's going to make. I think, as you say, SNP are going to lose seats, but why would there be this massive swing to Labour? I think it's more likely they'll just simply be people won't bother to vote. That's how I feel. A lot
Do you
of
know what I think?
supporters.
Sorry, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but I don't think Useless Yousaf is going to make it to the next general election. I think he's gone before the general election. And whether you like it, well, I mean, I certainly don't like it, but that will be a boost to the SNP in the polls, especially if they brought in someone like Forbes, who's far more palatable, certainly, to the average person than Humza Yousaf is.
That's right. We have to hope that Humza Yousaf stays on for as long as possible. I see people on Twitter going, "We've got to get rid of Humza Yousaf. Got to get rid of Humza Yousaf." What? Who's going to come in? It's going to be Kate Forbes, and she's going to they'll just go way up in the polls again.
Definitely, without a doubt.
Absolutely.
Yeah, she's a far more credible person than anyone sitting around her, especially people like Humza Yousaf and John Swinney. She would be a disaster for the UK if she got in. I'm not saying she'd get a referendum. She probably wouldn't. But she'd talk a good game and she'd keep them in power, definitely.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely no question about that. No question about that. Yeah. Christopher again says, uncontrolled immigration is like allowing a thief into your home and then allowing them to steal everything.
I think this is... You're not telling me if they couldn't stop some of this, they couldn't do it. they definitely could if there was the political will to do it. But
Yeah.
I think they like lower wages. Andrew Bailey, the governor of the Bank of England, who's quite frankly a joke, said a while ago that people need to stop asking for pay rises. Just look after the country's finances. This is a guy who sits there on something like £600,000 a year the guy earns, and he's telling people on minimum wage, etc., not to ask for pay rises. But the more illegal immigrants they bring in, and then have, I don't know, one big amnesty and allow thousands and thousands of them to stay, these people will work for peanuts. And then what happens is the average wage comes down because they have to come down, because then you're competing for your job with someone that's going to do it for half the money. It's just lower wages, lower growth, completely destroying the economy. And the only thing that grows in this country at the moment through mismanagement is the public sector, which we can't afford to pay for and have to borrow money to pay for now, because a lot of businesses, are closing down.
Yes. No, well said. Adam says, question for Ash. There was an article from the Scottish Daily Express yesterday about Yousaf only flying the EU flag and one day being and the Union flag only on one day.
Oh, I did see this, yeah.
And that's the only day that it can be flown. What are your thoughts on that? Well, I can imagine what your thoughts on that are.
I'll try not to swear. No, it's just useless Yousaf making a noise, isn't it? He's getting very, very desperate at the moment. And a lot of the noises he's making just strike me as somebody who is in serious political trouble. He's facing a rebellion from his own backbenchers in Holyrood. He's got a rebellion in Westminster going on at the moment. He's got MPs standing down left, right and centre because they don't believe they're going to win their seats back. He's in massive, massive trouble. And he's got a cabal, if you will, of people like Fergus Ewing and Kate Forbes, even people from the Alba Party like Ash Regan, can't wait to see the back of him. And he knows it. And all he has to do is make one false move, and they're going to just wait for the right time to strike, and he's going to be gone. And he's terrified. So he's just trying to come up with any grievance that he possibly can. That's the only reason he went to court the other day over that gender recognition bill, which over 70% of Scots can't stand. 80% of the UK's population can't stand. Yet he still went and spent £270-something thousand in court and sent that dreadful woman, Dorothy Bain, how she even has the guts to walk into a courtroom, I don't know, because I've never seen her win a case. And she lost again. She lost again in court, and now they're on about going back again and using taxpayers' money again. This is just a grievance manifesto, as always.
Exactly, absolute a grievance manifesto. That's well summed up. Good. Now, Derek says, and I see we're running out of time here, but Derek says, what are your thoughts about Drakeford's resignation today? Mark Drakeford, leader of the Welsh Senedd.
You want to go first to me?
I'm happy enough to see the back of him, but at the same time, I know he's just going to be replaced by some other tacky twerp.
You know what they've said? We hope to have a new leader by Easter. I'm like, come on. It's only the Welsh Senedd. There can't be that many to choose from. Like, Easter. I'll tell you what I think about Drakeford. He should have been in a care home months ago. This is the guy who has stopped all road building in Wales, unbelievably. He's brought everything to a 20-mile-an-hour limit, which is having a detrimental effect on the Welsh economy, because people can't get around fast enough anymore, especially for business deliveries, etc. This is the guy who stopped you buying kids' toys, books, and all sorts during the virus. He's an absolute lunatic, and he should have been out of power a long time ago. And he's only going now because he's actually more unpopular than the leader of the Welsh Conservatives, Andrew R.T. Davies. That's why he's going now. People are sick to death of Drakeford. Nobody's in favour of this 20-mile-an-hour limit, etc. Sorry, I know we're running out of time. Nobody's in favour of anything that he's done recently, and he knew that he was going to lose. Yeah.
Well, this is just a good point to bring up one of my favourite graphics, which we designed earlier this year, which is the voting at the Welsh Senedd. And if we just get rid of that banner along the bottom there, what this shows is that there on the right-hand side, the turnout from 1999 to 2021 at every single Welsh Assembly election, not one has had over 47% of the electorate turning out. Okay, so the Senedd has got no democratic legitimacy.
No.
It's never had more than half of the Welsh electorate turning out to vote. Never more than 50%. I mean, that's I couldn't believe that when a colleague of mine
That's terrible,
found
isn't it?
out
Yeah.
that information.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's beyond crazy. And as I see from that again, at least Westminster elections in Wales have averaged, since 2001, they've averaged 65% turnout.
Yeah.
The average in Wales for assembly elections, 43.7.
I'd like to see the same for Holyrood as well. That'd be interesting, because I think in Sturgeon's last election, if I remember correctly, they only managed something like, was it a third of the vote? But only, I think it was 35% of Scots actually came out to vote. So she got going on about this big mandate, but only 1 in 6 people actually voted for her.
Yeah, they haven't. I don't know the exact figures off the top of my head, but the average Holyrood election turnout in the last 5 elections has been 54%, compared to the last 5 Westminster elections in Scotland, which have been 66%. So,
see, at least that gives it some legitimacy, doesn't it? As well, it's over 50% of the electorate going out to vote. You can't really argue with it too much, but
the Welsh.
It just
the
shows
Welsh
that people
one's
take.
Crazy.
No, the Welsh one is, yeah, but it just goes to show, doesn't it, that people take Westminster elections far more seriously than they take the elections in their own region of the UK.
Exactly, and we make that point in this book that Westminster actually has more popular legitimacy, as we are calling more popular legitimacy than Holyrood or the Senedd. Now, it's the top of the hour. Thank you very much.
Yep.
That's a half an hour we've been speaking. That's
Flies
been really
by,
good. It does fly by. You are That Preston Journalist. You're on youtube.com/That Preston Journalist, and you're also on twitter.com/AKWriting88, and we encourage people to go to those, and please do follow Ash. We will have you on again, but it will be next year, no doubt. So it just remains for me to say, have a lovely, great British Christmas, and all the very best to you for the new year, and keep up the good work, as they say.
And to you and to everyone watching, have a lovely Christmas, and I will speak to you all in the new year. And I didn't know it was your birthday tomorrow, Alistair, but happy birthday for tomorrow as well.
Well, thank you very much. Cheers.
All right, I'll speak to you soon. See you later.
Good night.
Bye-bye.